Have you ever looked at God's creation and just marveled at who He is and thought about His nature, His awesomeness, His power, His majesty? The Bible tells us that the creation points us to the Lord. My family and I are at the tail end of a trip that we've taken to Lake Tahoe, and for those of you who have been here, you know that this is a beautiful part of the world. And throughout this trip, there have been so many times where I just couldn't help but to be in awe of the beauty of God's creation, and so the beauty and the majesty of the Lord Himself. We're going to be doing in the coming weeks a bit of a series on the creation and how the creation points us to the character, the nature of God. And so I wanted to start that series by just reading a couple of verses out of the Psalms, just to prepare our hearts, to prepare our minds for what the Lord might be doing in our hearts and in our lives through this series. So I'm going to read out of Psalm 8, verses 3 and 4. But before I do that, let me just give a little bit of context. The Bible talks about three heavens, right? The first heaven, the second heaven, and the third heaven. The first heaven would be the sky that we can see, so where the birds and the clouds are. And then the second heaven would be outer space. And the third heaven would be heaven itself, where we will one day reside with the Lord for all of eternity. And it's fairly easy to understand which heaven a particular passage would be talking about, just based on the context that we read. So let me read out of Psalm chapter 8, verses 3 and 4. It says, "When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained, what is man that you take thought of him, and the Son of Man that you would care for him?" Psalm 19, this is going to be verses 1 through 6. And just listen, just meditate on it, maybe throughout the day. Think about these verses as we prepare our hearts for this series on creation. And as Bill Kahn says, just let the Word of God wash over you. So Psalm 19, starting in verse 1, says, "The heavens are telling of the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of His hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world. In them He has placed a tent for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. It rejoices as a strong man to run his course. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit is to the other end of them. And there is nothing hidden from its heat." Beautiful words describing, right, the sunrise, the sunset, the day, the night, the expanse of the heavens, all pointing to God and His nature and who He is, His beauty, His majesty. So let those verses wash over you. Let those verses just speak to you as we begin this series on creation. I love you all, and I'll see you soon.